Welcome, everybody. My name is Noah King. I'm a software engineer here at Horizon 3, and I want to go ahead and give you a quick talk on Journey to OSCP, a basic guide for breaking into offensive security. So, who am I? Like I said, my name is Noah King. I'm a senior engineer at Horizon 3. Some of my background, I was a full stack engineer, still am, specializing in web app development. So I've worked for Horizon 3, specifically on our front end team, building our front end web applications for the last 3 years. Worked for a few other companies as a full stack engineer. So the whole web application stack I'm very familiar with. In addition to that, I was also an instructor at the UNC Chapel Hill Coding Bootcamp. I was an instructor for about 3 or 4 years. I did the bootcamp for about 5 total. I went on and did some instructing at the cybersecurity bootcamp as well. So a different mix of backgrounds and things that I've kind of done. Now you're probably wondering, all right, if you're a full stack engineer, how did it all start? Like, how did you get into cybersecurity? Maybe I'm interested in cybersecurity, specifically offensive security as well, which is the path that I've gone down. The way that it really all started was I like to tell the story of how I got into hacking because I found it as a fun story. There was an exploit developer interview at Horizon 3. So our chief attack engineer, he put out a job listing saying, hey, we need an exploit developer. We're hiring more attack members. And anybody in the company is welcome to do the interview. First person to get it right gets a bottle of whiskey. So I was really into just getting the bottle of whiskey mainly. But I took a look at it, and basically what it required was reading some Java code, finding a vulnerability in the code, like a logic flaw, and then writing an exploit to capture the flagger to get command execution on the target. So I started there. I had no idea of what an exploit was, how to write an exploit. I didn't know the terms of cybersecurity, like remote code execution, command injection, any of that terminology. I really knew nothing. I was just a software engineer trying to make a computer do something that was unintended. But I ended up writing my first exploit. And so here's an actual screenshot of the first exploit that I wrote. It's attack script JS. I wrote it in Node.js. It wasn't even like Python or some of the other standard exploit languages. But it was a very simple 27-line attack script. And when you ran it, you would give it the file name. So you say node attack script, give it the IP and the port number, and then you would just give it a command. So cat, the temp flag txt, and then you get back the flag. So that was kind of the interview. And then you had to point it at a production server. So I wrote my first exploit, and I was feeling really good about myself. Kind of like this guy in this meme. It's a little shaky putting sunglasses on at first and getting confident, but then you do it and you start feeling really confident. But then reality kind of hits, right? I don't have that much experience with cybersecurity. And so like, where do I go from there? What do I do now? Some of the things that really helped me kind of get my foot in the door, this is all leading up to OSCP, because OSCP is not really an entry-level certification to go for. It's a very difficult exam and certification, which we'll talk about in a second. So from there, I went down these different paths of how do I learn cybersecurity? How do I learn more about this? I did Hack the Box. They have a starting point. It was really nice because it has walkthroughs. It had machines. I could really try exploiting and kind of following along. It really guided me. And I did that for a bit. That was fun. That was a good way to kind of start introducing it to myself. Hack the Box, though, at times does get challenging. And when you're learning things, it's very frustrating. So there were points where I almost thought, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should just give up and go back to, just doing web development full time. But I kind of persisted through. That's the one thing to keep in mind with cybersecurity as well. But some of the other things I did as well was going to the UNC Charlotte Cybersecurity Bootcamp. In that bootcamp, I was a teaching assistant, and I also did instructing as well for the offensive security section. And that was really another good way to meet students, to meet other instructors, and to kind of learn different backgrounds and different pieces of cybersecurity as a whole. So not just learning offense, but learning defense, learning all the different avenues that you can go into with cybersecurity. Another thing that I did that's unique to me, at least, is the attacker's journey. So if you look over here in the top right, I did this webinar talk the first year, right when I first got into it. Horizon 3 was very gracious and like, hey, you have a real knack for speaking, and do you want to do a tech talk on the attacker's journey? It's where you're a newbie and you don't know anything. We're going to give you something to go learn, like SQL injection, Log4j, finding external assets, server-side request forgery, all the different kind of bread and butter attacks and different approaches. Go learn them in a month, figure it out, prepare a demo and kind of demo it, and we'll bring an expert on. So we brought different experts on as well with different companies and partners that we work with. And so by doing that, being able to set up a Java server that's vulnerable to Log4Shell, and then running that exploit and then walking through and explaining it, that was a really good way for me to also progress. But I know that not everybody's going to do that. But there's different ways and avenues that you can do it. Hack the box, go to a cybersecurity boot camp, the attacker's journey, or find mentors to guide you. Finding a mentor is huge. And using LinkedIn or connecting with different people at Horizon 3 are great ways to also just grow your cybersecurity community. I have a lot of people at Horizon 3 that I can look up to who are veterans at pen testing and cybersecurity. So it really helped me. And I just found those people and stuck close to them, tried to learn from them. But the big takeaway, the big thing to remember is you should explore all areas of cybersecurity. You don't know you like it until you try it. Something you might think you like, you might not like it. So that was kind of my next approach. All right, I wrote an exploit. What do I do now? And I did this for about 6 months, 7, 8 months, maybe. And then I moved on from there. So from there, what now? Well, the journey to OSCP officially begins. And when I was on the attacker's journey discussion, our CTO, Tony, he brought up the comment on the first attacker's journey. In a year, you'll have your OSCP. And we're going to go after that. At that point, I thought that was just way beyond me. I didn't ever think OSCP would become a real thing. But, at some point I was like, let's just do it. Let's just go ahead and, go on this journey. It's going to be fun. It's going to be challenging. And some of my initial thoughts and the feedback of OSCP. First thing, after I signed up for OSCP, I felt like Ralph from The Simpsons. I'm in danger. I don't know what I'm about to get into. From what I've heard from all my mentors and the cybersecurity community in general, OSCP is not easy. It's a very hard exam. It takes a lot of time and dedication. So here's some of the main takeaways. It's a 700-page PDF that they give you. It's about like 20, 24 chapters of different content talking about pivoting, UAC bypass, buffer overflows, Active Directory, credential attacks. Like, there's 24 different topics that you have to go through and read. And then you're doing activities alongside that to actually, to kind of like solidify it, hands on the keyboard, and to learn. Now, by doing all of that, you also get 10 extra credit points, at least when I'm doing the OSCP. They might have changed rules, but they still have extra credit. Definitely recommend that. There was over 100 machines in the network. So they have this lab full of machines that are vulnerable. Some of them are tied together. And so you can really learn a lot by actually going after the machines in the network. Hands on the keyboard is a really important thing. Buffer overflows, they were just a challenging area for me when I was doing the OSCP, learning how to exploit and overflow memory at a low level. It was just kind of hard because I always worked at that web level more. But, persisted, asked other students, discussed, read the material, and slowly I got through it and everything. Some other areas that were also challenging, at least for me, pivoting or tunneling, setting up, like getting host compromised on one server and then using that server to pivot further in the network. That was really hard for me to tie together and figure out how to set it up. But figured it out. Credential attacks, those were really fun. Learning how to crack password hashes, learning how to exploit Microsoft and do privilege escalation, dumping credentials with Mimikatz, doing Kerberos, like Kerber roasting or ASREP roasting, all the different types of attack methodologies, as well as Active Directory. There's so much more than just the content that's here, but it really requires you to kind of learn all the different areas of offensive security and the different mindsets. And the last thing really is the 48-hour exam. So you heard that right. The exam is 48 hours. The first 24 hours is you're on the keyboard, you have 6 machines, and you want to, kind of get domain compromise on the AD set, take over all 3 machines. And then you want to get a local low privilege user flag and a high privilege user flag. So there's 6 machines, you got 24 hours, take them all down is the goal. You don't have to get them all. Once you go through that 24 hours, if you get enough machines, you have 24 hours to write a report about all of your findings in the lab. And it's a fictitious report simulating a real world pen test of what you would do after you pass the OSCP and have a job. So these are some of my initial thoughts of OSCP as I'm coming into it. Now, the first thing that really helps and makes you ready for OSCP, if you will, is hands on the keyboard. I can't stress this enough. This is not the type of course or certification where you're not going to be using your keyboard a lot. Like, it's all on you to do the work. It's not really as much of a book to read and then multiple choice questions. It really does require learning all of the methodology to pen testing and the steps that you do. Some of the things that I did to have my hands on the keyboard, right? Work through the OSCP exercises, read all of that content, the 700-page PDF, even though it's a lot, it's very valuable. It's really how I learned everything to be prepared for OSCP. So I highly recommend it. Some people skip it. I really don't agree with that mindset. I would do the whole thing. Work to get the extra credit as well. Doing the extra credit, it prepares you more than you think because you're doing that entire PDF and its exercises. And that extra credit is really kind of what got me to a passing grade when I took the exam. I would have had to, hack another machine or get another flag potentially to get more points. So if you can get 10 points and you're just learning and doing the certification as you go, it's so simple. It's a no-brainer to go for the extra credit. They also have practice exams in the lab, which is exactly like an exam. They were called like OSCP A, B, and C, and there were 6 machines. Do those and simulate what the exam is going to be like so you have an understanding. I did that, and I think that was like the biggest thing that helped me pass. And then finally, really an approach, like how do you approach OSCP? It took me about 10 months to get through all of the content, enough labs, schedule the exam, and pass. So if you're doing this for 10 months or almost a year, you need to aim to try to hack like 1 box a day or more. There were some days where I would get 3 boxes in a day, and I was knocking them down really easily. Some days I'd be stuck on a box for a few days. But the goal is to always shoot for 1 box. The more you do, the more you learn. You actually have to hack stuff if you want to be an OSCP. So that's step 1. Step 2, perfect note-taking. Note-taking is really big because if you think about it, notes turn into reports. All the notes that you find and gather during an engagement are going to eventually turn into a report that you'll give to your customer. So writing concise and accurate notes is what I did. I don't like to note take. I don't want to sit here and write down every single command and all of its output. It can get very lengthy very quick. I tried to identify like the high levels. Port 80 was open. It was running a vulnerable version of Apache. I found an exploit. Here's the exploit. Here's the command to run the exploit. Screenshot it as you go. And that was usually pretty good for as far as like note taking. And what's helpful about that is if you do it in the lab, you take notes consistently in the OSCP lab, you have all of these notes from all these machines. You'll probably sometimes run into something similar. So if you exploit Apache on one machine, you might run into Apache again. And having notes to reference back to, super helpful. Um, Reference your notes if you find a target with similar technology that helps speed you up. Keep notes on cheat sheets or make your own. So there's different cheat sheets out there. There's like an Nmap cheat sheet. There's plenty for different tools, right? I also found this really helpful to just write your own. So I use Obsidian as my note taking, but I would write down, here's all the helpful commands in OSCP, and I just grew a list of them over time. Then I would just copy and paste, and it sped me up a lot. So the note taking, holding on to commands, keeping notes on how you install tools. So I talked about how pivoting was hard. It was all due to my installation with proxy chains and things like that. So like keeping notes on installs, cheat sheets, your own helpful commands, the whole steps that you're taking along the way during the pen test, very helpful because these notes turn into reports. One of the big things that was the most important for the report in the OSCP is I just took screenshots every time I hit something that was progress. If it wasn't progress, I didn't screenshot it. But if I kick off an Nmap scan and then I find that there's an open port that's vulnerable, screenshot that, start exploiting it, screenshot every time you get progress. That worked really well for me. Step 3, leverage your community. There's a lot of different people that are taking the OSCP, preparing for different certifications. There's a lot of mentors out there. There's so many people that you can learn from. Don't expect to just go at the OSCP fully alone. It's a lot harder to do it that way. If you have a community of different people you can talk to, bounce ideas off, get advice, learn from, it's perfect. So where do you leverage this community? How you find the community? Well, if you're doing the OSCP, they give you a Discord where all the students are. They have mentors on there as well. So if I was working on a box and I'm stuck, I need somebody to just give me a hint. You could talk to other people and they would try to kind of hint you along the way. They wouldn't give you the answers, but they would kind of guide you and help you. I don't think I would have been as successful if I didn't go out on Discord, pose questions to what machines I'm working on and where I'm stuck and getting help. So definitely get help. Listen to podcasts though, too. I found that is a really good way to learn when I'm on the go. So if I'm driving in the car, throw a podcast on that interests you. Darknet Diaries was kind of one of my favorite ones, so I just put it here. But there's many podcasts talking about offensive security, defense. There's a ton of different stories. It's a really good learning approach as well. And then, YouTube videos. I love YouTube videos. Horizon 3 AI, we made our own set with the attacker's journey. There's a lot of other YouTube content that we've created that I just watched and learned, as well as NahamSec, John Hammond, Cyber Mentor, IPSec, and OffSec. So the company OffSec for OSCP, they have their own channel. They walk through machines, walking through machines and how people exploit them and what their thought process is. Super helpful. So IPSec and OffSec are also really good for that. But learn from the experts. The more you gain and gather knowledge from them, the more you just learn. So that's why I say teamwork makes the OSCP work. I had a lot of people at H3, Horizon 3 that had OSCP, and I could go ask them for advice and what they think and where I'm at and give updates. And so it's very helpful. Now, 4 is take the exam. And I think the exam is probably the hardest part. So we'll talk about that a little bit. First thing is create a strategy for the order of machines and what you're going to go after it. There's different ways that you can go. You can either do the 3 standalone machines and get a low privilege user to privilege escalation, or you can do the AD set and do one of the other boxes. There's different ways to get a passing score. So you need to figure out what your strategy is. In general, the AD set, the Active Directory, that's the better way to go because really you can't avoid not learning Active Directory, and it's easier. The standalone ones were set up to be harder by default. Use your one-time Metasploit wisely. So if you like using Metasploit, if you're familiar with what Metasploit, you only get one opportunity to use it. And if it fails and you're done. So I really had to think about when do I use it? When I was in the practice exams, I reached for it at one point, it didn't work, and then I had to figure out a different approach. But luckily, my Metasploit worked when I was taking the exam. I think I used mine to like bypass UAC on Microsoft. That was kind of the sticking point for me. Metasploit was really good for it. So that was when I used it right at the very beginning of the exam almost. Screenshot all your progress. I've talked about that one. Every time you're making progress along the way, you got to screenshot it. And then all the screenshots will stack up and you just follow them in sequential order for your report. Read the rules. Ask your proctor if you're unsure about something. There's a lot of rules to OSCP, and I think that's the other part that's a little frustrating at times. They expect you to sit there and to go read all the documentation, read all the rules of how they want it done. And if you miss one little detail, you can be penalized. So, for example, when you take the exam, you have to take a screenshot of the flag and the IP address of the machine. If you forget to get the IP, it becomes invalid. And then you have to put it in the report. So like they'll do these 3-step things that make you really pay attention to detail. They're very picky about how things are done. Use the sample report. So they provide a sample report when it's time to write the report. You can modify that. That's what I did. It was the easiest for me, just using a sample one. But a couple of things too, like pick a spot that you're going to take your exam and don't expect to move. That's why I have a photo of Elliot in a server cage, because they literally will kind of cage you into one spot. I picked my office in the basement, but they will not let you move from one side of the office to another chair. So find a comfortable chair, find a comfortable area to work, have your monitors set up, make sure you have internet and a backup plan if internet goes down. They talk about that, have snacks, have different things. But like in general, you need to be prepared to spend 48 hours of your time doing this. And that was the hardest part for me. I think the most challenging thing about the OSCP is I took 22 hours, 21, 22 hours to do the exam. I did not sleep the first night of the exam. I started my exam at 11 a.m. or it was 10 a.m. And I went all the way until 7 a.m. the next day. And that was really tiring. If you stay up all night and you're hacking 20 hours straight, you start to feel a little tired and sick and different things. But you get through it. And once you really get through the machines, writing the report wasn't as bad because you don't have a proctor. You can go sleep. You can kind of relax. But another thing to be aware of too is you got to be patient. You can go hours without progress. And this is another thing just in cybersecurity, offensive security in general. You know, you see all these elite hackers taking over machines, getting different compromises, 0 days, remote code execution, and all this. But it's not easy. A lot of it is failure. You're just failing a lot and going without success. So you have to learn to also be patient. You can go hours without progress. I started off the exam. I got onto the first machine in about 45 minutes. So I had a good starting point. I think I got the AD set in about 4 hours, 4 or 5. And then I moved on to the other boxes. And then I stagnated for a good 6 hours with like no findings, where it was hitting like maybe 3, 4 in the morning. And then I started to make more progress again. So you can go hours with no progress. It can be a little, a little scary. Time is ticking, but just be patient and you got to learn how to manage your time. So let's see what the next slide is. Hopefully after you take the exam, you'll pass the exam. For me, I felt like Jordan winning one of his championships after I got the email saying that I've passed. And of course, there's my certification, May 25th. Passing the exam is a huge milestone. And at that point, you start thinking about different things. It's a big accomplishment. So really enjoy the moment too of when you pass. Now, there's also this question though, and I know this comes up a lot. What if I fail the exam? A lot of people don't pass the exam the first time, and OffSec doesn't really release the pass failure rates. So it's hard to know what percentage of people fail the first time or pass, but usually it's expected that you might fail. I knew a lot of different mentors. I've read a lot of different things from other students who have failed and they took it again and they failed. Some people failed it 5 times and still took it a 6th time and passed. That really requires a level of patience and just a spirit of passion to continue after that. It's a hard thing. Some people have given up on it, but really, if you work hard, you can definitely get it on the first attempt. So I passed on the first attempt. Luckily, I did not have to do a reattempt because I did the practice labs. I evaluated constantly where I struggled on the exam or in the labs. In general, I figured out that I was weak with like pivoting for a while. I was weak with UAC bypass. I was weak on some of the Active Directory type attacks. So I just had to lean into that and do more of it, become an expert. And that's kind of how I got through those areas that I struggled on. Hack more machines. Keep an eye out for tricky pitfalls. The tricky pitfalls is the thing that also really frustrated me along the way with OSCP. I would tell my wife, I would go all the time and say, hey, I'm working on a box. I can't figure it out. These are the steps. This is where I'm at. And I'm just kind of like using her to walk it through and think it out loud. And then I would go work on it again. A few hours later, I finally figure it out. And like, they were just sometimes little gotchas. For example, PDFs. If you find a PDF in the lab, you might want to look at the metadata of the PDF. You might get a username from it. And so that was like a tricky one. I never ran into that in the lab. I never read about that in the 700-page PDF. Sometimes you just have to be creative. You have to keep your eye out for things that you wouldn't expect. And then lastly, try harder, right? That's the motto of OSCP. I always tried to keep that in my mind, try harder. Sometimes it's hard to tell yourself to try harder when you've been trying hard, but you just push through it. And that's kind of some of the mindset that it teaches you. I have this chart over here on the right, and this is actually from OffSec. They published an article talking about your chances of passing the OSCP. And if you look at this, this is the OSCP pass rate. So if you did only 11 boxes, this is the number of machines that you compromise. If you did 11 boxes, you have a 28% chance of passing. I did somewhere about 45 boxes. And then I just said, I'm going to go ahead and schedule it. Let's try. So I got about 45. I had about a 60% chance of passing. So knowing this, knowing that the more boxes you do, the greater your chances, it's a good way to put you at ease. It's a good way to kind of create a target and a goal. The more boxes, the more prepared you're going to be, kind of point blank. So that was another thing, at least that I noticed. Just wanted to share that statistic. Now, I'm kind of at the end of my slide deck, but I know I got some questions. So let me go ahead and take a look at that. The first question is, hey, Noah, when you say hack machines, is this through Hack the Box? So Hack the Box, they have their own set of machines that you can practice on and you can exploit. But the OffSec community, the OSCP, when you buy the certification, they give you a ton of machines to work with. So you would be hacking a lot of machines in the OffSec labs, different lab from Hack the Box. And so let's see, we got that question. If you have a question as well, feel free to put it into chat. We're just kind of running through some now. We have another question. What techniques did you leverage to remain focused and continue to push through the training content over the 1-year period? Did you approach Pen 100, Web 100 prior to pursuing OSCP? I didn't do anything with Pen 100 or Web 100. Some of the things too that were in my favor is I know how to code. I've built web applications, so I kind of skipped over the web stuff because I felt very comfortable with web in general and JavaScript and websites. But I think Pen 100 and Web 100 are a good intro to that as well, if you don't feel like you're ready to start that. But, really, when I got into OSCP, The only things I was doing prior was hack the box, doing those machines, doing the attacker's journey, kind of just learning different content and teaching it. And then I just went for the OSCP. So if you feel like OSCP is what you want to go for, and you have enough basic understanding with penetration testing and offensive security, I think you're probably ready. That's also the case sometimes where people hold themselves back. They say, I need to do all these other things first. To a certain extent, but don't also hold yourself back long enough either. And then let's see, the other question is, how did you remain focused with the training content for a 1 year period? I really tried to get into this just a habit. It becomes a habit. So I would go to work, and then after work at 5, from 5 to 7, I'm going to do OSCP. Or on the weekends, I was doing it on Saturdays and Sundays in the afternoon. So I really had to find time for it. It's kind of like another relationship, if you will. My wife was of the understanding that you're going to have to devote a lot of hours to this. Like, you devote months, and it requires you to be at a computer. You usually need 2, 3, 4 hours to make any kind of progress and to learn. So you really just need to figure out how to carve out time for yourself. I think that that's the biggest thing. And being aware that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and just enjoy the ride. That's really the biggest thing. I enjoyed doing the OSCP because I was learning something new every day. And so if you really just go after, what can I learn today? How can I get better? How do I keep getting more reps in, hacking more machines, getting more comfort? I got to the point where I started to memorize all the commands, and I had a fluid pace and a methodology. I knew what my approach was. I started off doing recon, use Nmap, use Masscan, HTTPX, use all those tools, capture different data. And then I would just move down the flow, take notes as you go and everything. But, it's a journey. It's a marathon, and it should be one that's fun and that you enjoy. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in. Otherwise, we're at time. Thank you so much. And finally, as Horizon 3 likes to say, go hack yourself. Y'all have a great day.